former Clemson offensive lineman from 2022 to 2024. He's a current Clemson football recruiting assistant, does stuff with the Draft Network, and we're going to pick his brain on not only the draft class for the Lions, but just stuff around the NFL, that is. And please, Mason, tell me if I'm fucking this up. Mason is it Johnstone? Is it Johnstone? Oh, hell yeah. Let's bring him in. All right, we nailed it. How you doing, Mason? What's going on?
Doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, no problem. I'm glad. I do this thing when we have guests on. I always throw the last name out there. I butcher a lot of last names. Glad I got yours correct, Mason. Appreciate you for joining. I love to pick your brain on some of the stuff that transpired for the Lions. We cover the Lions here in Detroit, obviously, and a lot of Lions fans. We trust Brad Holmes. He's an excellent talent evaluator, and it seems like we go through this thing covering the drafts where a draft will end and there'll be these national people that try and grade drafts right when it ends, which to me is insane because you don't know what any of these players are going to turn into. It's like when Brad drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and everyone gave it like a D. And then now everyone's like, well, hey, it's kind of an A. You look at this draft class now. I mean, can we just start with the first round pick, Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle at Ohio State, a player that many people said here locally, and I'm sure there's some nationally, reach. He's good. He's a guy, you take in the 40s, not at 28, in the 40s. But then now we found out that the Bills were prepared to take him. What do you make of a player kind of like Tyleik in what he did at Ohio State? Because to me, that dude is a monster.
Yeah, I think with Tyleik, and especially you kind of get to those later rounds, and especially when you're the Lions and you're sitting here at the end of the draft, your next pick is at 57. The draft economists might say, yeah, it's a reach in a heavy defensive line class. Some people might have their own choice of guys, but I think Tyleik has a very concrete role that he showed at Ohio State that I think translates beautifully to the NFL. I mean, this is a guy that's going to stop the run, and he's going to be an early downs defender who more than anything raises the floor of your defense. And he's just kind of a staple of consistency. So maybe not the flashiest pick, and anyone can call whatever a reach when you're sitting there at 28 and you've got 29 spots between picks. But
right.
I think that was a pick that made a lot of sense for, finding a guy that can play a role for our defense.
Yeah, and Mason, appreciate you joining the show. As obviously with the offensive line the Detroit Lions have, going two guards, a lot of people, there were some question marks with the two guys that they got. I just want to ask you specifically on Tate Ratledge. I'm sure you've seen a lot of his film and broke him down a lot. Can you explain to the people here in Detroit if they're kind of iffy on that pick, kind of what they're getting, the Lions are getting in a guy in Tate Ratledge and what he could bring to this team?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of the same thing I just said, raising the floor. So with Tate, and Georgia was an interesting evaluation this year because the running scheme and even some of their protection stuff, there's not stuff on film that's sexy with Tate. And so what you're really trying to look for is bare bones, what is this guy going to give me? He's a day one starting caliber player. He's strong, physical. We saw his testing was outstanding. And I think at Georgia, that kind of got hidden. It's a little bit more of a vertical running scheme based offense. And so sometimes you don't get to see the range that guys have and all of the fun, exciting plays that maybe some of these other guys in the class would have. And then you also just get the reviews back from Georgia and you see the way he interacts with media. And I think people undervalue that stuff, especially you're talking about a Detroit Lions team that you guys are trying to get over the hump. I mean,
right.
You have to bring in the people that match your culture, and that's Tate all day. I think on both phases of the game, this is a guy that's just a reliable protector. Like, he doesn't try to do too much. He knows what his job is. And he plays to that kind of standard of consistency and reliability. I think he's a great football player. You could argue that, okay, maybe you're not getting, and I don't even want to say this, maybe you're not getting an all-pro guard, but that's not what we're asking for.
Right.
We're asking for a guy to play here for 10 years and to never think about him again. That's the entire goal.
Yeah.
Hey, and the mullet gives him
the mullet's incredible.
Little bit of an edge too.
The mullet's incredible.
Hey, Mason, just kind of going down the line. Appreciate you joining the show. Talk about Tate Ratledge. On the other side, in the 5th round, they took Miles Frazier out of LSU, was at FIU. What do you make about him? Because he has some versatility with him, but what do you think he could bring the Lions? Day one, probably not too much, but later down the line, what can he project to be in the league?
Yeah, Miles was super fun. I watched him at the Senior Bowl up close, and he was one of these guys that, and it's so fun at the Senior Bowl because all of these guys kind of find their moment, and his was they cross trained, right? So the guards were playing some tackle, the left tackles were playing right tackle. I think it was the same day Josh Connerly got bowled by Mike Green at right tackle.
Yeah.
But they kicked Miles out there at tackle, and he almost looked better. And he probably did at the Senior Bowl. And when I think about what he can bring to the Lions, I think of it like a relief pitcher. This is a guy that, okay, he's not going to start, like you said, day one. But you think about a guy like Patrick McCarry for the Ravens, who had 5-position versatility. I think Miles Frazier is legitimately a guy who can relieve you at tackle, but then also generally has a floor where you can put him anywhere on the offensive line and feel generally good about what you're putting out there. The quickness, the mobility, just the raw athleticism is there. And I was a big fan of his physicality, and that move to tackle. I think this happens a lot. I've seen it, especially at Clemson. Just, we've had a lot of injuries the past couple of years, and you get guys that never play tackle in their lives, kick out to tackle, and the timing changes and the game slows down because at guard, everything's so quick hitting. And then they get out there and they almost feel more free, more composed. And Frazier's especially unique because, last game of the year, bowl game against Baylor, LSU's got 4 offensive linemen. 3 of them opt out. Miles Frazier's the only one that stays. So, and what that did for Miles Frazier, okay, maybe, I'd say he fell to the 5th round, and people said that it might've been because of interviews and things like that. But I think this guy did a lot for himself because he played Baylor and played right tackle, and he got a month's worth of training and exposure to that position. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and now he's a multi-positional player. I mean, that completely changes his stock there.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Mason, because, we do our live reactions to these drafts, which, it can be a blessing and a curse because, I hop on a camera right after a draft pick's made and I yell things into a microphone I maybe later regret. But when the Lions traded up 33 spots to get Isaac Tesla, you mentioned you're at the Senior Bowl. Apparently the Lions fell in love with this dude at the Senior Bowl. All right. And he's from Michigan. So there's that, people accept him no matter what because he's from Michigan, but they also love the player. And I understand why. I mean, Brad mentioned how he saw him at the Senior Bowl running over DBs in the run game. They love his physicality. He picked him in the 3rd round, which, when you trade up to get a player like that, you give up some future capital. I think people get a little shocked by it because they're like, who's Isaac Tesla? Arkansas. And then you look at the quarterback play in the offense. What do you make of a pick like that? Because Brad said it was his favorite wide receiver in the entire class. Maybe not the best, but his favorite wide receiver. What are some of those qualities you think he sees in a guy like Isaac Tesla, man?
I think with Tesla, and it was kind of funny. I'm a Dolphins fan, so everyone, Tesla was their guy, their late round guy. Everyone wanted him.
Right.
The consensus was like somewhere between 150 and 200, but then. And that's what I find so funny is that everyone kind of comes to these conclusions about their guys. And then you sit there and guys go much higher than you think. And we all act surprised. Like, no, we all liked him. Just no one was willing to sit there and label him what they really believed. I think with Tesla, I didn't get to see him that much at the Senior Bowl, but I think the size is impressive. He can play in the slot. He can play outside, which I think he did a majority of this past season at Arkansas. I think, again, this seemed like a draft where the Lions took specific, they saw a vision for each player. Right. And I think that's an important thing to remember. I mean, I'm not saying everyone should have blind faith in their organization, but when you're sitting there, evaluating your roster, and then you find a guy like Tesla who almost fits, a peg for your offense, I think. How high do we take that guy? And to be quite frank, it doesn't matter. All that matters is getting, your guy in the building. So I'm a Tesla fan, and you can sit there and argue where he should have gone. But I do think that as long as you're drafting with the intent of, an intentional pick, right? He's going to have a role. He's going to fit this role in our offense, and it's the right one.
Hey, I do want to ask you, because that's actually going off of that. When you do look at the draft and how some of these GMs go about it, kind of, what do you think is the best way to go about it in the NFL? Do you, because we have this argument a lot in Detroit, because Brad does go BPA a lot, and there are GMs who just go best play, that go best player, but there are GMs that go strictly like, hey, we need this player, we need this player, we need this position. Do you have, like, say you're a GM, Mason, and you're going through the scouting process, which kind of is the best side to go about it? Because there are a lot of people, I think, in Detroit's fan base right now who are mad, like, hey, we needed a specific type of player. And Brad goes, I want the best players that are available when I am up to pick. And we will have a plan for them, like you said, but I want the best players. And then there are fans who are like, Brad, why aren't you getting this specific guy? Like, it was the edge rusher for us in Detroit here for the first 4 rounds until we got Ahmed Hassan out of Boise State. And fans were just, it felt like Detroit was on fire because fans were so mad about that. How would you approach that if you're a GM, and do you look at it differently than that?
Yeah, I think if I were a GM, it's a little bit, I think for me, the immediate needs that I want filled, I address in free agency. If I was managing a team, because rookies are usually not good. Generally compared to their counterparts who have played in the league long enough, first-year guys are usually not good, which is why you look for a guy like Jahdae Barron, or just players like that day one, okay, they're going to be accustomed to the speed of the game. I think my idea with the draft is I'd always err to the best available player, but it's also a matter of where does this player fit in our team? So it's maximizing the role in mind with the best available player for that role, right? And I'd say, and it's so funny, everyone always talks about, I think if you ask GMs, they'd always say they took BPA, because they probably always think they are. But when you actually break it down, like you said, you address edge later in the draft. I mean, sometimes there's like Ahmed's a dude, and you sit there and you're like, oh, like we didn't address edge early enough. Sometimes you know where your value lies, and you know that you've got a guy later in the round who, you think you know what you're going to get from him. And so I mean, it's the age-old question. I think it's important to fill the roster, fill leaks with veteran established players, and then just get as many swings at the bat on the top players on your board.
And Mason, I'm going to ask you this question because you're the perfect person to ask, because offensive line play in and out, and you're not biased here. Okay, you just talked about free agency and addressing immediate needs. And the Minnesota Vikings in free agency did a lot of that on the offensive line. Then they go out and they get Donovan Jackson, Christian Darrisaw coming off injury. If you had to pick an offensive line between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings going into 2025, who do you think has a better offensive line play this year between the two?
I would go with the Lions. I think what they've and correct me if I'm wrong about some of this, Decker, Glasgow, and Ragnow have played so many snaps together for the Lions. Plus, Penei Sewell's been here a long time too.
Right.
I think that carries a lot of weight that people don't realize, that camaraderie, just the connectivity. Like, I mean, you're talking about 5 as 1. You want guys that have played together a long time. They understand where each other's weaknesses lie. They know how to communicate super effectively. For me, I was reviewing the Lions offensive line going into the season, and I can't remember. It was right under 300 combined games started for the Lions between those three. And now it's probably however many, but that carries so much weight for me. Just in the consistency of your offense is just having guys there that are, number one, healthy, and number two, know how to play with each other.
Yeah, well, Mason, you mentioned a player that, the city of Detroit all kumbaya when we took him, the edge rusher, Ahmed Hassan. And listen, a lot of teams, I think what scared some teams is not, I think it's the 5 years of playing football. I think that maybe scares some people just because, he hasn't been playing it for long. It depends how you look at it. Some teams might look at it like, he's going to come play against NFL players. Some GMs like Brad look at it like 5 years and you already are this type of player. I like him. He's a high effort guy. We were at the combine. We got to see him at the combine. This dude is, yelling at position coaches. What do you make? You kind of teased it a little bit, but what do you make of a guy like Ahmed coming out of Boise State? How good can he be? What's his ceiling look like to you?
Right. I absolutely, and I think it's interesting. Like for me personally, I was a guy that I was a basketball player my whole life. It was really my senior year of high school that I started to take football seriously. And there was this thing, like everyone all of a sudden was really interested in me because I was 6'7" and 6'7". I was, 240 pounds. I was a basketball player. I had a high ceiling, they thought. And I think that rawness, when you get a guy like that, you feel like you can mold them. It feels like a blank plane. But then there's also the part of, potential is a scary word, but then it's the other side of that where you have to look at their character and, who is the person? Because that's what you have to trust.
Right.
Because you don't get to the potential without that. And Ahmed was a guy, like I remember, I know one of his agents well. He called me and he told me about him. And he raved about him. This is like the nicest, most down-to-earth guy ever. But even more than that, I don't know that there's someone who he's got that, I don't even know how to describe it. He's got it, right? Like
right.
this do or die outlook on being successful. And it's not based in, he wants to be a great football, like he wants to appear to be a great football player. He wants to be, a notable guy. It's because he genuinely feels called to do that. Like this is a guy that's super involved in his faith. He's got just an incredible story. And so, when I look at a guy who's only played football for 5 years and he's raw and he's got things he's going to have to work on. And like you said, he's already at this point. There's a lot to be excited about. Then when I factor in who he is as a person, it really comes together to me as this guy that could end up being a starting caliber defensive end. I mean, he's got great explosiveness off the ball, but then he's got a power component to him that I think he can grow on. And generally just the physicality. Like this is a guy that you see the love for football. You see the football character come out every time he plays. And I'm super excited about him. That's probably my favorite pick you guys had because I just love the guy.
Come on now.
Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, officialctsports.com.